Hello again everyone, and welcome to this second part of my series on data analysis. So in the first part we had a look at Optimum G and their product Optimum Lap, which is a free lap time simulation software. As I said in the first video, it's good to within about 10%, so it's pretty good for us sim racers who are alone and don't have much data to compare if we wish to improve our driving. It's a way of generating our own comparison data using the computer as a perfect driver, for want of a better term. Thanks to everyone who commented on the first video. It's nice to know that people appreciate what we're doing, and also it's particularly nice to know where people want these videos to go, what it is that they're interested in. Also, just as important to know where I'm missing stuff out. You know, if there's something you're not understanding, chances are there'll be loads of other people that aren't understanding it too. So if you do feel like that, you know, please leave a comment, and then it's something that I can look into. Okay, so the question posed in the first video really is, it's all very well and good having a tool like Optimum G, but where do we get the information from to fill it out accurately so that it compares well with the model that we have from our sim game? I'm going to use rFactor 2 as an example in this video. It's because it's the one that I'm most familiar with in terms of getting physics out that we can make use of. Assetto Corsa I'm reasonably familiar with as well, and so I know that that's possible. iRacing, don't get me started on. Like, you're just not going to get decent data out of that, out of the model. There are some things that you might be able to do to get some values from the logged data that you get. Maybe I'll have a look at that in a future video. But for now we're going to use rFactor 2. If there's enough interest, I shall attempt to refresh myself on Assetto Corsa and get the corresponding data out of that as well for another video. But for today, rFactor 2. Now, some of you will be familiar with the process of installing mods in rFactor 2, but essentially once it's installed, let's go back to the root. Mods in rFactor get installed in program files x86. Sorry. If you've only got one hard drive or one partition like mine, then it will be in program files x86 Steam, Steam apps, common, rFactor 2, installed vehicles. Then you get the list of the vehicles that are installed, and the one that I'm going to play with today is the RSS Porsche 911 GT3 RS. And when you go inside these folders, you come to a list of what are known as mass files, which are compressed. It's rFactor's version of a zip file from what I can tell. And quite commonly you'll have one that's called main, and it's inside this that you'll find the physics files. Now, a lot of the paid for content, this will be encrypted. There are ways and means of getting access to some encrypted files, but that's frowned upon by the community, so we won't go into that. But for example, this Porsche, the physics is open so that we can have a look at, and a lot of them are, especially the ones that are not made by the game developer themselves. So to get access to that, we need to go to the mass utility file. Utility, spit it out. But basically you can get to this from the rFactor 2 launcher. I think it's one of the icons at the bottom. but it's the one that's a square icon with the number 2 in it, and you just simply go open, navigate to the file that you're interested in, and open, and then you get a list of these files that are inside the mass file. So anything with .tgm at the end is a tyre definition file. HDV is your sort of main physics file. Engine.ini contains your engine data. Gears.ini your gears. So it's these that we will be interested in using to get our data for Optimum G. Sorry, I keep calling it Optimum G. It's Optimum Lap from Optimum G. It's optimumg.com if you're interested. If you didn't catch the first video, you can download it for free from there. Okay, so to have a look inside this, highlight it, right mouse button and click extract. Select somewhere for it to go. I've already done it, but we can then open it in Notepad because it's just a text file, and inside the text file you've got all of this data. So one of the first things that we want for our Optimum Lap model is the overall mass. So here we've got it as 1482 for rFactor, so we can put 1482 in. I'm going to skip over the next section because that's not data that's easily accessible to us from our sim model. We'll have to do some googling to find this and some playing. Air density is almost always going to be sea level air density, unless you're not going to be far out, unless of course you are at a very high altitude, where it would make a bit of a difference. The next thing we need is tyre data. So I'm going to put in rolling resistance of 0.02. I'm going to in 0.02. I'm going to put in the video description a link to a website that's interesting and gives you some figures for rolling resistance, but essentially it's around about 0.02, and that'll be close enough. Tyre radius we can get from our tyre. We go back to the mass utility program, we can get that from our TGM file. If you look here, it's m underscore 325 by 71 by 21 by 12.5. These are, so M for Michelin, and then you've got your tyre sizes. So we know our biggest tyre, 325, yeah, this is our rear tyre. So again, if we open the data in Notepad, we've got a little section at the start which is not of interest to us at the moment, and then we'll come to a collection of paragraphs, for want of a better word, all headed node. Now in rFactor 2 the tyres are defined as the geometry of the perimeter of the tyre. So node 1 would be, for example, the outside of the tyre, somewhere in the bead, in the tyre bead, and then node 2 will be a little bit further around the perimeter and about halfway through your nodes. In this case, if we scroll down, you'll get to this encrypted data. You can scroll just above it, you'll get to the last of the nodes, in this case node 76. So node 76 will be on the opposite side to node 1. If we scroll to about halfway between 1 and 76, there's 35, 37. Node 37, what we're after is the Y value, the so what we really want is the largest negative y value of any of the nodes, because that will define the point of the extremity of the tyre radius, if you like. I've done it earlier, and node 38 here is our biggest negative y value, so it's 353 millimeters, because these values are in meters. 353 millimeters is our tyre radius. That's it's in meters in Optimum Lap as well. So 0.353. In video 1 I showed you where we got our longitudinal and lateral friction. We can get that from our Motec data. This is essentially just the peak cornering G and the peak braking G that we see on that data. Then the next section is engine data, and we can get that from our engine.ini file. So once again, back to the mass utility, find the engine.ini, right mouse button and extract it, and that looks like this. Again, another text file with loads of data. I've annotated this line just to help understand. So these are the lines of data that we're interested in. The first value here, 250, is the RPM. The next value is the engine brake torque. The next value is the engine torque that we want. The next value is the idle function, and the last one is the pressure power. So what we want for Optimum Lap is the 250 RPM and the -30 torque, and then if you go to the next RPM base value, we've got 500 RPM and we've got -30 Newton meters, 750 RPM, -30. It's because they're all very low RPMs, we're getting low torque values. As we go further up through the rev range, let's find say 5,500 RPM, we've got 458 Newton meters. So from all those values we can plug that in to our engine data here, so that we can match our engine torque graph between Optimum Lap and rFactor's model. The next thing we want is thermal efficiency. That's almost always going to be 30%. Internal combustion engines always around about 30%. What fuel you were going to use, 9 times out of 10 it'll be gasoline or petrol for those of us outside of the US. Then the next data we've got is gear ratio. Now we can see what gear ratios are in our rFactor model if we open the gear.ini file. So gears.ini, if we open that, we get this text file full of data. It just happens that this mod that I've pulled up has 123 options of gear ratio, but essentially you've got teeth in versus teeth out. So teeth out divided by teeth in is your gear ratio. I've annotated one here as an example. We also have our final drive ratios, our bevel gear and our diff ratio. One multiplied by the other gives us our overall final drive ratio. So in this particular example, this isn't overly helpful because I don't know which one of the, or which of these 120 or 7 of these 123 gears are used in my rFactor mod. So these are not particularly helpful to us if we don't know which ones of those we want. So there's two ways of, or the best way of doing it is When you go into rFactor 2 and you go into the garage section, all of these ratios will be available for you to choose for your car. So whatever ratios you chose to do the lap that you're using for your comparison will be the ones that you want to copy over into Optimum Lap. Now, like I said, where you've got these are gears in and gears out, to get your ratio for Optimum Lap is simply to divide one by the other. So 45 divided by 12, your ratio here is 3.75 to 1, and that would be the ratio that you'd put here. Now, if you haven't yet run your lap in rFactor with this and got a setup and got a set of gears, you can always use, if we go back to the HDV file and scroll down to the section that says drivetrain, you'll find it with that header. You scroll down, you'll see these lines, gear, so this is first gear down to 7th gear. So the first gear that they're using as standard in the model, and unless you change it in the garage section, this is what the car will run with. First gear is 1245. Now in some mods, some HDV files, this is basically the text that you would see in the garage section, so it doesn't have to be there. But above it you've got gear 1 setting 0. So gear 1 setting equals 0 would mean that they're using the very first ratio listed in the gear.ini file. So in this case 3.75 to 1. And we can put that in here. 3.75. Back to the HDV file, we can look up what it's using for the second gear. So second gear, it's using 1331. Like I say, if this was another mod that didn't have this line in there, then we would be looking to count to the 35th gear ratio in our list. Don't worry, most mods don't have 128 gears to choose from. Most have 10 at most. Okay, so we can go through and pick out all of the gears from this or from our setup in game to fill out the rest of our gear ratios. Next we've got final drive ratio, which again we can get from our gears. There may be options on this, but in this particular mod we've only got one option for each. So if we calculate our gear ratios, individual gear ratios, bevel gear at 24 divided by 16, 1.5. And final drive 37 divided by 14, 2.63. Multiply the two together, gives that final drive ratio of 1.5 times 2.63, 3.945, and it's that value that we would put in Optimum Lap. Drive efficiency. Now the classic values for front and rear wheel drive would be 80% for rear wheel drive and 85% for front wheel drive. Whether that's strictly true or not is open to debate, but it's not going to be too far off, certainly close enough for our purposes at the moment. And then the last things that we've got, as we spoke about in the first video, are our scaling factors, so that we can easily adjust all of these areas to try and match the data that we're getting from rFactor. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Anything you don't understand, please leave comments and I'll try and address. In later videos what we'll do is we'll then run this simulation and I'll drive some laps in that Porsche mod so that we've got some data to directly compare. I'll show you another program called Z1- which you might want to investigate, which will give you a way of bringing in the outputted CSV from Optimum Lap and the CSV from Motec from rFactor, so that you can directly overlay them and compare. And that's at that point we can start to see where we differ from the computer's perfect driver model, and that will start giving us some hints on where we can improve our driving. But that'll be for another video. So until then, thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel so you get notifications when I do the next in the series. And until then, thanks very much for watching.